You can listen to The Professional Left wherever you get your podcasts, on Netroots Radio, or at our website, proleftpod.com, where you can also contribute to this podcast. There's a PayPal button at our website, or you can mail us a letter and or contribution at P.O. Box 9133, Springfield, Illinois, 62791.
This is the podcast for the week of January 10th, 2025. It's not safe for work.
Recorded live from the Cornfield Resistance, where...
So let's see what happens. Postmaster Dragon, any mail today? I'll bet you think that I'm going to say no mail. Yeah, as a matter of fact, that's what I thought. What are you going to say? I'm going to say there isn't any mail.
It's The Professional Left with Driftglass and Blue Gal. And there is no mail today because today was the funeral of President Jimmy Carter.
Right. So they shut down the post office, as they should.
As they should.
The National Day of Mourning. Mm-hmm. We also want to express our deep, deep sadness and condolences and all of our hugs to those who lost homes in the Palisades fires, especially because it's personal. My boss, John Amato of Crooks and Liars, lost his house. And he had a small, basically manufactured home in a community where with beautiful views and lovely neighbors and all of that. Mm-hmm. And it's gone.
Yep, all gone.
It wasn't just his house. He is okay. He is okay. Mm-hmm. He got a couple of his musical instruments and important papers out. He has very few clothes with him. He is staying with a friend in the area, so he has a roof over his head. He is, one of the lucky ones. Mm-hmm. I also noticed this afternoon that President Biden has canceled his planned trip to Italy, and instead today, after Jimmy Carter's funeral, went to Southern California to stand by Governor Gavin Newsom and to announce sweeping aid for victims of this tragedy. Mm-hmm. And social media is full of thanks to God that this man is still president until the morning of January 20th, both for the Jimmy Carter funeral and for this disaster.
Yep, I am. I know I am.
And one other quick note, John Amato did an interview yesterday on the Brad blog, which, as you may be familiar, Driftglass is on with Digby often. Mm-hmm. On the Brad blog. They are also in L.A.
Yep.
And I believe that they were going to be asked to evacuate the studio today. I don't think it was too close, but it was for safety's sake. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it's widespread. It's horrible. It's affecting tens of thousands of people. And our hearts are with you in Southern California. One more note, Driftglass.
Okay.
As we mentioned last time on Tuesday, this episode marks the 15th anniversary of the Professional Left podcast. Driftglass and I have been doing this show for 15 years.
Yeah.
Quite a milestone.
As the joke goes, boy, are my arms tired.
Boy, are his arms tired. But I will tell you something, you guys. Driftglass said to me before we started recording, he said, boy, am I glad you're my wife. Mm-hmm. And I love you. And, stuff to the effect that he wouldn't get through this without me and vice versa.
Yeah. Well, and I mentioned how this podcast sucks. This is going to suck.
He always says that.
Everything's terrible. This is the worst thing I've ever done. The outline is awful. We're all doomed. We're all fucking doomed.
Yeah. Yep. He goes through this writer's stage that I am very familiar with as his wife. It will be, what, 14 years?
Yeah.
Yeah, because we podcasted for a year before we got married, but 14 years in August. I'm used to that funk that Driftglass gets into, because I get into it as well.
I have noticed during knitting moments, when not all is going perfectly, that's a very familiar funk that it comes to all of us.
Terrible. This sweater is going to look awful.
This is garbage. This is just garbage. This is all garbage. Yep. I'm ripping all the stitches out.
Creative types just get into that of, this is never going to work.
We do. And, it's also, It's also a notable anniversary in that this is the 2-month anniversary of us not watching cable news.
Yeah. And I don't miss it. Though someone had a clip on social media of Lawrence and, my TV lawyer,
right,
Andrew Weissman, talking to one another. And I watched it and I was like, wow, I haven't sat down at night to watch that for 2 months.
Yep.
Don't miss it. Nothing on them. No. I'm just not going to support MSNBC while they've got Joe and Meek on in the morning and they're paying them millions of dollars to go down to Mar-a-Lago.
And you know what?
After years of telling us that Trump was a fascist.
Yeah. Oh, 100%.
And before that, having him on as call-ins and creating his candidacy in 2016.
Yeah. No, this is, and we do not, we're not ignorant of the news. The news seeps through the walls. We get plenty of news over social media, over email, over newsletters. We're not missing anything. All we're missing is the endless jabber of people who we really don't like and people who we would rather see elsewhere sitting uncomfortably inside of a corporation that is bending the knee to Donald Trump. And,
right, exactly.
Exactly.
Those suits upstairs need to stop it.
Yeah.
And I don't think that they are wired to do that because shareholder value is their value.
Yeah, you and I have noted, and millions of people have noted, the collapse of the legacy media and the capitulation, the acceptance, the change in tone. Mm-hmm. Joe and Mika just want to help Donald Trump be the best president he can be.
Bullshit.
That's all they want to do. That's all
Bullshit.
We still criticize. We criticize because we love.
Bullshit.
It's 100% bullshit. It's just a show.
Yep.
And that kind of communication, that kind of propaganda has effects on people over the course of days, months, weeks, years, decades, etc. And so today, we're going to talk about why it has become impossible to meaningfully communicate with Republicans and why it's going to be that way for a very long time. And we might even bat around some ideas for getting around the problem in our more upbeat moments, which are coming a little fewer and further between these days. And to do that, we have to take a little side quest into no fair remembering stuff territory.
And we are sorry if some of this brings up unpleasant memories. Some of it's funny, and some of it is just like, oh my God, we lived through that. And you'll have two feelings about that. One is we lived through that. That's good. And the other is we lived through that.
Holy crap.
Oh,
Why didn't it stop there? Why didn't it stop then?
Exactly. But look, we're going to bring up some stuff, and it's going to be some stuff. So strap in. Specifically, we're going to talk about the fate of a woman named Orly Tates, who I bet you haven't thought about for years. I know I haven't. I haven't thought about her for a very long time.
But I did.
You did. And
sure did.
Orly Tates is not dead.
No.
She just became irrelevant and nearly forgotten. She was tossed off of the Lawrence O'Donnell show once the birth certificate became released, and she started off on some other anti-Obama tangent, and Lawrence just said, enough already, you're a proven liar, I don't want you on my show. She cut off her mic, cut her camera, and she was gone. But as near as we can tell, she is still living in Laguna Niguel, California, and she owns a dental practice. But it really wasn't that long ago that she was the tip of the spear in a massive conspiracy to cripple the presidency of Barack Obama and maybe get him impeached, while at the same time putting Donald Trump in contention for the 2016 Republican nomination for president. This is from Mother Jones, August 10th, 2009. That's the first year of Obama's presidency.
It's called The Before Time, about which you're not supposed to talk, but we do anyway.
Not supposed to talk about the before time. Well, this article is called Meet the Birthers. Who are these people really? Born in the former Soviet Republic of Moldavia, Orly Tates is a peroxide blonde SoCal dentist with a law degree from an online academy and a black belt in Taekwondo. More than anyone else, she has vaulted birthers. Their preferred nomenclature is doubters, or the eligibility movement, into the public eye. In 2008, Tates helped to bring a lawsuit on behalf of Alan Keyes, disputing the validity of Obama's birth certificate. This year, she hit the headlines again when she filed another lawsuit from an Army Reserve major who charged that Barry Soetoro was not his lawful commander-in-chief. Both suits were rejected, prompting Taitz to accost Supreme Court Justices John Roberts and Antonin Scalia at public events to demand an investigation into the matter, unquote.
Yeah, we'll love to see that. Now, she's the most famous, one of the most famous, but she was not alone at all in this. This Mother Jones article has bios on all the leading birthers. I'm not going to go through them all. It's a very long article, but they did include Phil Berg, who was a 9/11 truther, who hopped the birther train after a brief tea tour with the Puma crowd. Remember the Puma crowd? The small but noisy band of Hillary Clinton supporters who refused to accept Obama had won the 2008 Democratic primary. And there was Alan Keyes. Quote, the perennial candidate, anti-gay crusader, and anti-abortion activist is nevertheless perhaps the birther movement's most credible member, which isn't saying a lot.
Because he's black.
Because he's black.
And from and ran against Obama in Illinois for Senate.
They pulled him from Maryland, I believe, to run against Barack Obama and lose spectacularly. But this guy was chosen. He was an ambassador. He was chosen by the Illinois Republican Party to run against Barack Obama for the Senate. And in doing so, I believe he disowned his own gay daughter. Just a scumbag, top to bottom. Anyway, a party to the Taitz lawsuit challenging Obama's eligibility to hold the presidency, Keyes, who called Obama a radical communist and a usurper. Does that language sound familiar? Dr. Ron Polaric, which is not his real name, who claimed to be a document imaging expert. There was Andy Martin, also not his real name, he was the guy who started the rumor that Barack Obama was a secret Muslim. There was Swiftboat scumbag Jerome Corsi, who he joined in, as did Fox News' own Lou Dobbs, and on and on and on, including actual elected Republican federal office holders who maybe didn't fully embrace the entire bullshit lie, but were more than happy to go on the record as having doubts and serious questions about Obama's birthplace. That list included Senator Richard Shelby, Richard Shelby from Alabama, Republican, Representative Bill Posey, Republican from Florida, Representative Roy Blunt, Republican from Missouri, and Representative John Sullivan, Republican from Oklahoma.
Now, you may remember one of the things Orly Taitz tried to bring up as she was getting kicked off of the Lawrence O'Donnell show. She sued over Obama's Social Security number. From the Wall Street Journal, April 27th, 2011, quote, Orly Taitz raises a new issue, Obama's Social Security number. This is in the Wall Street Journal as news. In an interview with Washington Wire, I just can't. This network, so it goes to the Washington Wire, it's quoted in the Washington Post, and then it's off to the races. That's what happened.
It's quoted in the Wall Street Journal.
Yeah. In an interview with Washington Wire, she now says Mr. Obama once used a Social Security number that was not assigned to him, unquote. She also sued to get him off the ballot in 2012. The Topeka Capital Journal reports on September 20th, 2012, quote, Taitz files Kansas suit to block Obama candidacy, unquote. Oh, listen, Orly Taitz was the Laura Loomer of her day.
Yeah.
The louder and crazier she got, the more media attention she got, and the more Republican friends she began to gather on Facebook.
Yeah.
From Politico, July 27th, 2009, quote, birther leader, GOP is with me.
Yay.
Orly Taitz, the California attorney dentist, leading the charge of the so-called birthers movement, is boasting on her blog that she's made some high-profile friends on Facebook. Now, get these people who friended her on Facebook. Republican National Committee Chairman Michael Steele. House Republican Whip Eric Cantor. I remember him. He was a young gun.
He was a young gun. One of the young
guns, yes.
That's right.
And GOP reps Mary Bono Mack and Cynthia Loomis. I am in total disbelief and greatly honored, Taitz wrote on her blog today after Cantor appeared as one of her Facebook friends. To me, it means that the leadership of the Republican Party understands the importance of the issues and legal cases I brought forward. I hope more congressmen and senators join and either become additional plaintiffs or bring to the House and Senate Judicial Committee meetings the issues of Obama's illegitimacy to presidency, as well as suspected illegal activities by Obama and his supporters. The birthers argue that President Barack Obama was not born in the United States and is therefore not eligible to serve as president. What they mean is he's black, and we're going to stir up shit.
Uh-huh.
Obama's birth certificate and all credible evidence show that he was, in fact, born in Hawaii.
Barack Obama was the OG Biden crime family, you know?
This is the end of the Politico article. Republican National Committee Press Secretary Gail Gitcho said she has been deluged with calls about Steele's friend status with Tate's today, a day when the RNC was trying to roll out its, wait for it,
yeah,
healthcare counter agenda.
To be fair, they had a concept of a counter agenda.
They had a concept of a counter agenda
back in 2009.
Yeah.
Oh,
they hadn't come up with, death panels killing your white grandma yet.
No, but they were there. They were getting awfully close. This is from Salon, May 17th, 2010. Again, also very early in the Obama administration. But you know who has begun to rear their ugly heads? The Tea Party. Oh, quote, Michelle Bachmann pals around with birther queen Orly Tates. The Minnesota congresswoman was photographed with the one woman in America with crazier ideas about Barack Obama. Wonderful news. Big-haired Minnesota Congress loon Michelle Bachmann was finally photographed with crazy attorney dentist and insatiable lover Orly Tates, the queen of the birthers. The Tea Party patriots invited both of them to speak at a lunch in California on Friday. Tate's claims birtherism didn't come up, but that's literally the only thing she talks about, so I'm not sure if I believe her, unquote. So, you get all that. She's making publicity, she's making headlines, people are hooking up with her, they're friending her. She's a weirdo, but kind of useful weirdo, and so, inevitably, the exploiter of broken people takes her side. This is from ABC News, April 11th, 2011.
Another political story making news this morning, Donald Trump's growing poll numbers on a list of possible presidential contenders. Since he first appeared on GMA last month, he's been taking to the airways to continually question President Obama's birth certificate. What's he up to? John Berman is here with some answers. John.
Cynthia, Donald Trump sure knows how to make people watch.
And from that moment on, with hate radio and Fox News and frankly most of the legacy media more than happy to go along for the ride, Trump used this ridiculous, racist lie to make himself the center of attention. From then on, it was Trump versus Obama. They were co-equals. And when Obama was finally pushed to the point where he thought, screw it, I'll disclose the birth certificate so we can get on with actual important business, it was Donald Trump that the legacy media rushed to interview. And goddamn if he didn't make a 7-course meal out of it.
Today, I'm very proud of myself because I've accomplished something that nobody else has been able to accomplish. I was just informed while on the helicopter that our president has finally released a birth certificate. I'd want to look at it, but I hope it's true so that we can get on to much more important matters so the press can stop asking me questions. He should have done it a long time ago. Why he didn't do it when the Clintons asked for it, why he didn't do it when everybody else was asking for it, I don't know. But I am really honored, frankly, to have played such a big role in hopefully getting rid of this issue. Now, we have to look at it. We have to see, is it real? Is it proper? What's on it? But I hope it checks out beautifully. I am really proud. I am really honored. Now we can talk about oil. We can talk about gasoline prices. We can talk about China ripping off this country. We can talk about OPEC doing numbers on us like nobody has ever done before. we can get onto issues, and hopefully when I sit down with interviews, people don't start talking about birth certificate, like they've been doing.
And what was the CNN headline? Quote, Donald Trump to vet Obama's birth certificate, unquote. Because now
that's the CNN headline.
Because now Donald Trump has the authority to declare whether or not Barack Obama's legitimate. And that was given to him by the legacy media.
We should have given up on them a long time ago.
Yep.
So finally, that's the end of it, right?
Sure.
We're done with this nonsense? What do you think? No.
No.
Of course not.
Nothing is over.
No. From USA Today, December 2013. Quote, Donald Trump and Orly Tates reinvigorate birtherism after Hawaii plane crash.
Yep.
Because Hawaii's in the news, so...
Ooh.
Yeah. And from CNN 4 years later, while Trump was president, November 29th, 2017, quote, President Donald Trump isn't convinced Barack Obama was born in the United States after all. It is a constant feeding to these stupid racist people.
That never ends.
It never ends. And today, Obama sits next to him at Jimmy Carter's funeral.
Yeah. So that's what birtherism did for Donald Trump. But what did it do for Orly Tates? Well, she's still nuts, and she is still desperately trying to claw her way back into the spotlight. But now she's just a joke. The last news item I was able to find out about her was from January 2021 from an outfit called Law and Crime. This is the headline. Quote, Orly Tates accuses Vice President Harris and Senator Schumer of borderline criminal conduct in bizarre attempt to shut down Trump's second impeachment trial, unquote. And if you go to Wikipedia and look her up, the pages on her are just wild. Just paragraphs and paragraphs of nutso accusations and dozens of transparently ridiculous lawsuits, stuff you've heard about and stuff you may not have heard about, such as Obama's first act as president was to donate money to Hamas, which she claims will be used to build Qassam rockets. And the FEMA camps conspiracy theory. Remember this? Remember FEMA camps? Yep. Boy, they sucked up on that for a long time, didn't they? This is Obama is having the Federal Emergency Management Agency build internment camps for anti-Obama dissidents. And your crazy Uncle Liberty absolutely believed that shit. And of course, Osama bin Laden was actually killed before 2011 when he actually died, with his body being kept on ice. And yep, in a refrigerator somewhere in New Jersey. And the announcement of his death, this is how deep the conspiracy goes. The announcement of his death was timed to divert attention from an upcoming court case that Tates was litigating challenging Obama's citizenship.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
It goes that deep.
It goes that fucking deep, man. It goes balls deep. Well, now, back when this madness was useful and exploitable by Republicans, Tates was everywhere. She was being interviewed by everybody. And once she reached her sell-by date and her crazy bitch ravings were no longer useful, she became just another rusted, used-up tool. She was discarded like a used condom in the same ash heap of broken people where momentarily useful crackpots and cranks like Mike Lindell, my pillow guy, and Laura Loomer are definitely headed.
Yep. Because when you go crazy, you go full crazy, they're not going to pick you up again.
No. Well,
you have to remain useful in that regard.
Once your lie becomes no longer useful in the moment, you are no longer of any value to them, and so out you go.
And you're easily replaceable.
Of course you are.
Because there are dozens of people waiting to take your place. So why are we talking about Orly Tates and not something important like the Gulf of America or a detailed discussion of who sat next to who at Jimmy Carter's funeral? We're talking about Orly Tates and Laura Loomer and Mike Lindell and the entire conservative media infrastructure because of what they represent, what they have done to this country, and why it is no longer possible for us to communicate meaningfully with Republicans.
Exactly.
And by communicate, we don't mean anything as lofty as debate or persuade. God forbid. We're just way beyond that now. We speak two entirely different languages with two entirely different contexts.
Yeah. And I thought this metaphor might be helpful for you Star Trek nerds out there. The Next Generation nerds. This is not an original series metaphor. Sorry, guys. But think of it as that Darmok episode. Except in that episode, the Temerians, who spoke only in metaphors, wanted to make a peaceful first contact with humans. In fact, their captain was willing to risk his life to try to make himself understood. He died in the effort. That's how important it was to them to reach out to other species. Our situation is completely different. Republicans see the very language and context that we use to communicate as an assault on their values. So the more we try to find common ground with them, the more threatened they feel and the harsher they lash out. This is so completely alien to the way we think that we just keep trying it and it just keeps failing. So today we're going to explain why this approach not only fails, but it just keeps making things worse. And please bear with me, because to do that, we're going to talk for a minute about an ancient battle tactic. So again, bear with us. Indulge me, if you will. If you don't know what a kite shield is, you may have seen one in a sword and sandal epic, and I'm not an ancient weapons expert, so please forgive me if I get all this wrong. A kite shield was a long shield, sort of shaped like a teardrop, and the front lines of the Byzantine infantry were required to have shields no smaller than 6 spans high. Now, a span is the width of the spread of your hand, so this is a pretty substantial shield. It's a big, tall shield. And these shields, when used side by side, could protect the formation from the hail of arrows that they were going to get while they advanced or retreated. Very useful. During a battle, their job was to stay at the front lines of the battle as they attacked with a long lance or maybe a crossbow and protect the rest of the infantry. Or, if you were losing or you had to retreat, their job was to man the outer perimeter of the army. Make a shield around the army that the arrows couldn't get through. And if you've seen the movie Gladiator, and I know you have, so don't lie, I know you've seen Gladiator because it's on every other day, you'll remember that a similar tactic was used by the gladiators in the Colosseum when they were being attacked by chariot and arrow fire. By locking their shields together, the gladiators could keep themselves safe from crossbow fire, and by pivoting at a strategic moment, they could cause an attacking chariot to crash and flip over. Now, I'm not sure shields were ever actually used in real life to flip chariots over, but you get the general idea.
Yep. Next, we need to understand how emotional investment and how information works. Not factual information or false information, not truth or lies, just information.
The subconscious is motivated by emotion, right? Not reason. We need to find a way to translate this into an emotional concept.
Let's say you're a good-hearted liberal and you're motivated by a desire to feed the hungry or heal the sick or welcome the stranger, all that Jesus stuff, Well, by and large, you will accept information that helps you achieve that goal. And you will lock your shields against information that attacks your goal to, for instance, feed the hungry, provide school lunches for all kids. All right, that's just as an example. You will accept information about school lunch programs, healthy eating initiatives, food deserts, and even very detailed policy proposals to help you achieve your goal. You will lock your shields against libertarian Darwinism that says, let them starve. You'll go against gimmicks that let the government off the hook by redefining condiments or napkins as food. Or just assholes who don't want to feed hungry kids of any income group, or expand Medicaid, or properly fund schools. This is from Wikipedia. The ketchup as a vegetable controversy stemmed from proposed regulations of school lunches by the USDA's Food and Nutrition Service, FNS, in 1981, early in the presidency of Ronald Reagan. The regulations were intended to provide meal planning flexibility to local school lunch administrators coping with cuts to the National School Lunch Program enacted by the Omnibus Reconciliation Acts of 1980 and 1981. The proposed changes allowed administrators to meet nutritional requirements by crediting food items not explicitly listed. While ketchup was not mentioned in the original regulations, pickle relish was used as an example of an item that could count as a vegetable. In the Reagan administration's attempt to slash $1.5 billion from children's nutritional funding, school lunch program requirements were worded, whether deliberately or not, so as to conceivably allow for designating ketchup as a vegetable, allowing the USDA to eliminate one of the 2 vegetables required to meet minimum food and nutrition standards and thus shrink costs, unquote. And this is how Republicans do it.
Yep.
They cut the budget and then write regs that help administrators deal with the cuts by making services not required anymore.
Right. This is how they got rid of the fairness doctrine, by simply reinterpreting the doctrine to mean that the president could just terminate it at his convenience.
Yeah.
And Reagan enlisted Tony Scalia and Robert Bork to give him the majority on the courts that he needed on the federal courts to do that. And they just said, nope, this doesn't apply anymore. We're not going to do this anymore. And 10 seconds later, Rush Limbaugh is all over the country, is syndicated all over the country. But that's a different story for a different day. This is from stateline.com, and it's about Medicaid expansion. Nearly 1 of every 5 uninsured working age adults across the 10 states that have not expanded Medicaid under the Affordable Care Act are, according to a new analysis, stuck in a healthcare limbo known as a coverage gap. That means they earn too much money to receive Medicaid, but not enough to qualify for financial help to purchase their own plans on the marketplace. In Alabama and Mississippi, mind you, this is only happening in red states.
Yeah. Oh, and mostly in the Confederacy.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because Obamacare, black guy, black Democrat. In Alabama and Mississippi, more than a quarter of uninsured working age adults are left with no affordable pathways to health coverage. According to the analysis from the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, which is a progressive think tank that researches federal and state budget policies, overall, 1.6 million adults between the ages of 18 and 64 face the situation in the non-expansion states. Mississippi State Representative Robert Johnson, a Democrat, said the lack of insurance coverage contributes to other problems, such as the closures of hospitals that have to cover the cost of treating uninsured patients in all types of communities. There's a knock-on effect to all this stuff that's disastrous. Yeah. Quote, this is not a conservative or liberal issue. This is about the people that we represent in the state of Mississippi, whether they be black or white, Johnson said in an interview. This is a life or death issue, not just for individuals, but for whole communities, unquote. So,
and may I interrupt for a moment? I read an article this week that the Kansas legislature decided, because the problem is Medicaid is administered by the states. And Kansas decided it was just awful that that state was administering a program that gave Medicaid to people in prison. And so all of a sudden it was going to be the prison's responsibility to provide health care to their inmates. Well, one inmate had severe liver disease and wound up needing over $1 million worth of medical care, which on Medicaid would have been covered by the federal government.
Yep.
And instead, and now it's these sheriffs running to the legislature and saying, please, God, expand Medicaid to cover prison inmates. Not to be nice to prison inmates, but to prevent us from having to close the prison because we're broke.
Yep. Well, they are legislating out of their perverse values.
Right. Well, and these rural hospitals are closing in these states and no one can find an obstetrician because there's a brain drain of doctors leaving. Yep. They're creating this.
Of course they are. And they're creating this because this is not them doing, tripping ass backwards into these policies. These are policies that they believe in.
Oh, yeah.
They believe in making prisoners' lives horrible and not giving them anything, giving them nothing. They believe that Democrats are child murdering monsters and abortion should be illegal in all cases under all circumstances. And the consequences of that are they don't give a shit about what the consequences are because that's not their problem. So you ask yourself, how can these people and these Republicans, be specific, these are Republicans we're talking about, turn their backs on hungry children or sick Americans? How can they do that? How can they fucking sleep at night? And the bigger question is, how can the meatheads who keep voting these scumbags into office be so goddamn smug about it?
Yeah, when you might need a hospital.
I'm protected. I'm in. Yeah. I'm white. I'm in.
Yeah, right,
I'm good.
Right.
Well, as a good-hearted liberal, you are emotionally invested in feeding the hungry or caring for the infirm or protecting the earth or whatever, right? Probably all of the above and maybe even more. These are what you will lock your shields to protect from racism and ignorance and greed. You'll keep raising money and raising awareness and protesting and calling your representatives and speaking up at community meetings to try to advance your cause because this is your emotional investment. And you are dumbfounded that anyone could possibly be against feeding hungry children or replacing lead pipes or, holding insurrectionists accountable for trying to overthrow the fucking government or electing a competent, capable, honorable public servant instead of a corrupt, racist, serial liar and convicted felon. Now, maybe if these mopes just had more information, because you have so much data to back up what you believe. You have mountains of studies and white papers. If they would just fucking listen for 1 minute to the facts, right? That would solve things.
But they don't, do they?
No.
No matter what you do, they just don't. They don't just ignore you. They mock your earnestness. They are happiest when they are metaphorically capering around burning bonfires of your fancy studies and white papers. Because you're deep state or you're an elitist, Ivy League or whatever.
You and your fancy science and your vaccines.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Or they're cheering on some has-been garbage person shooting up a case of Bud Light because you care about the fate of a trans person.
Mm-hmm.
This is from Rolling Stone. Quote, conservatives are heartbroken that Kid Rock gave up Bud Light boycott. I mean, where are your principles, Kid Rock?
Remember the Bud Light boycott?
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Months after an outrage over the beer brand, one of the ringleaders says, it's time to forgive and forget. And some are calling him a sellout. It seems like only yesterday that Kid Rock was firing an assault rifle at cases of Bud Light in protest of their brand partnership with trans entertainer Dylan Mulvaney. Now, that's an image that it's pretty hard to forget.
Yeah.
Shooting an assault rifle at a case of beer. Kid Rock did that on camera, and that kind of buries itself in your memory hole. Okay, but time flies, and it's already been 8 whole months since that week in April when Rock helped kick off a right-wing boycott of the beverage, one that caused a drop in brewer Anheuser-Busch InBev's stock price and enshrined the culture war slogan, "Get woke, go broke." A lot has happened since then. 8 whole months, Driftglass.
Jesus.
In October, AB InBev struck a deal worth more than $100 million to make Bud Light the exclusive beer sponsor of UFC fighting. That Ultimate Fighting Championship $100 million deal, mixed martial arts franchise. And by the way, it counts Kid Rock as one of its celebrity fans.
Wow, that worked out great.
I understand Donald Trump has been to a UFC fight more than once.
That has worked out well for everyone, Blue Gal,
everyone.
You must admit.
So, weeks later, Kid Rock gave an interview to Sean Hannity of Fox News, claiming that he had never called for a boycott of the beer. Indeed, he continued to drink it in public and serve it at his Nashville bar.
Mm-hmm.
And that he and Donald Trump had enjoyed a great conversation with Anheuser-Busch CEO Brendan Whitworth at a UFC event about why the Mulvaney promotion had set them off. So they had aired their grievances with the CEO of Anheuser-Busch.
Sure.
And the CEO of Anheuser-Busch had arranged for $100 million to go to UFC fighting.
Mm-hmm.
And Kid Rock likes UFC fighting.
Mm-hmm. See, free speech champion once again wins the day, Blue Gal.
Right. And the image of him using an assault rifle on a case of Bud Light we're going to forgive and forget.
It never happened.
So you can see this now. why reason doesn't work. $100 million bribe works.
Mm-hmm.
Why do they believe such ridiculous lies? Why are they so happy when they stun you with their barbarity? I mean, I thought that the whole trans person drinking a beer on social media was the moral issue of our time.
It was, for a minute, until it was no longer useful, and then it stopped being the most moral.
And there was money involved. Yeah.
Well, and once money enters the picture, you can stop worrying about drinking liberal tears. And you can stop worrying about what the base thinks, because the base, as we've said a million times, are reprogrammable. I mean that literally. Mm-hmm. Their brains are now completely reprogrammable. What they said last week, they will forget and move on to the next thing. And they'll look at you weird, like you even bring up that shit, because that's not the way it's supposed to be. Why is this true? Because they have shields too. Just like us, they have shields. Shields that they use to protect what they value most highly. And you may ask yourself, what do they value most highly? They value the belief that they're always right about everything and are smarter than everyone. That you and I are monsters and or deep state dupes. And that if it ever turns out that they were actually wrong about something, it was never their fault. It was all part of some vast, evil, liberal deep state conspiracy that you and I are a part of. And that belief is the core of who they are and what they are emotionally invested in. And all of your mountains of facts, including the things that these mopes themselves said just days or weeks ago, which contradict what they're saying today, all of those are just a hail of potentially fatal crossbow bolts against which their shields need to be locked together tighter and tighter. And what are their interlocking shields? What do they use as a series of interlocking shields? Those are the lies they believe. Those endless lies that we've all heard for decades and decades. Decades of lies. Lies about Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton. Lies about Vince Foster. Lies about the Mina airport. Lies about soul cooking. Lies about tan suits and death panels and birth certificates. About immigrants eating pets and hurricanes being faked and the Biden crime family. Lies about the 2020 election. Lies about January 6th. So, okay, you ask as a good-hearted liberal, but what about when a big lie just falls apart? To extend that analogy, why can't the truth get through and help them see reason when a shield collapses, right? Seems like the perfect opportunity. Well, my imaginary good-hearted liberal friend, I have to ask you right back, haven't you been listening? To you, such things as whether or not Barack Obama was born in the U.S. are a matter of truth or falsity. When something turns out to be false, generally we say, oops, got that wrong. We correct ourselves. Sometimes it's very painful. Might take years. And then we get back to pursuing our good-hearted liberal goals. But to MAGA mopes, the endless lies they tell are not about truth or falsehood at all. Those lies are just bits of kit designed to protect what these mopes are most deeply, emotionally invested in. They're just never wrong, and that they're smarter than everyone else. And anything bad that happens is the fault of us liberal devils. And you want to know how I know that? Because this is from the Rolling Stone today. Quote, right-wingers are blaming the LA fires on diversity. Donald Trump, Elon Musk, and commentators across conservative media are blaming the blazes on everything but the climate crisis. Unquote. This is from Le Monde. You know, the French newspaper Le Monde? This is from them today. Trump slams Democrats, blames Governor Newscum for deadly fires in Los Angeles. Unquote. This is from Vanity Fair today. Quote, right-wing pundits blame DEI, and we know what that's code for, don't we, Blue Gal?
That's the N-word, Driftglass.
That's the N-word. It sure as hell is. And Democrats, in predictable deluge of wildfire misinformation, they prioritize DEI over saving lives and homes, Elon Musk claimed falsely in one indicative post, unquote. You think they're grateful for all that truth that slips in when one of their shields breaks? That they'll respect you for it? Are you nuts? They'll hate you even more for it. All of your facts are nothing but a volley of painfully stabby arrows that need to be blocked off immediately. And in that moment, they will settle for any lie. They'll grab anything, no matter how ridiculous, to shut you up.
Yep. DEI is the new CRT. which is always the N-word. It just is.
Yep.
Do you remember the series of rapid-fire lies Republicans ran through after January 6th, Drift Glass?
Oh, I do.
Right at the time, during that week, at first, most elected Republicans were outraged because they'd been personally threatened, or at least they pretended they were, because they fundamentally never understood the base of their party. To the base, the failure of the J6 coup represented a massive failure of their shield system. They were in imminent danger of being exposed to a fatal dose of reality, and something had to be done. So, suddenly it wasn't Trump supporters who did this terrible thing at all.
No.
And in rapid-fire succession, a variety of different and contradictory lies were cobbled together. It was Antifa. It was the fault of the secret deep state FBI infiltrators who tricked those poor patriotic Republicans into doing the deed. Then it was Nancy Pelosi's fault. Still Nancy Pelosi's fault. Mm-hmm. Then it was the fault of the Capitol Police who let those peaceful protesters in the building. Mm-hmm. Only this week the word Hezbollah entered the chat.
Of course, because it's a magic conjure word.
Right.
And finally, when it became impossible to blame anyone but the insurrectionists and the traitors who led them, suddenly, well, you know what? Maybe J6 was a good thing. Yeah, it was a noble undertaking. Because maybe those rascally deep state liberals really did steal the 2020 election. Maybe J6 was justified, Blue Gal, a heroic thing. And suddenly, there was no maybe about it. Those cunning deep state commie liberals, that's you and me, definitely stole the 2020 election, and the freedom fighters of January 6th were martyrs and political prisoners. And watching all this from the outside, it felt like watching a moron go insane. The lies were so stupid and obvious, and they shed them so fast, and they scampered off to the next lie so awkwardly that, come on, this is ridiculous. This is so dumb. This isn't fooling anyone. Then came the J6 committee and the dozens and dozens of hours of testimony by eyewitnesses. So surely, all this is going to make a difference, right? It'll make the difference. It'll tip the scales. But once again, to believe that is to fundamentally misunderstand the Republican brain. They do not care about true or false. They do not care about fact or fiction. All they care about is protecting the core of their identity. The belief that they are always right about everything, they're smarter than everyone, that you and I are monsters and or deep state dupes, and that if it ever turns out that they were actually wrong about something, say it with me now, it was never their fault. It was all part of some vast, evil, liberal, deep state conspiracy, which you and I are a part of.
Don't forget real Americans, Drift Class.
Oh, yeah, real Americans. They're all real Americans, not us. The lies about January 6th were sloppy and stupid because they were grabbed up, because at the time they were grabbing up any scraps of anything out of which they could throw together some temporary defense. They didn't know which lies would work, so they tried everything all at once. It didn't have to hold for very long, just until the Republican Party and conservative media came up with more permanent lies behind which these racist cowards could hide their grievances and their preening self-regard. And this is why they love Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. Because he and Fox News and Hate Radio are their Hephaestus. They're Vulcan. They're the tireless manufacturers of an endless supply of shiny, new, tough lies, shiny new shields to replace the ones that reality shatters and need to be discarded. Orly Tates and her lies were useful until they weren't. Once those lies had outlived their usefulness, they were dropped and forgotten, and new liars telling new lies took their place. It's a fire hose of lies, and it's not going to stop.
And you can see when there is a glitch in the matrix.
Absolutely.
How quickly they turn on that source of lies.
Absolutely.
The Romney's going to win in a landslide.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, you saw it right after the Iraq war started to go south.
Yep.
George Bush went from being a military genius, and we should all shut up and keep our mouths shut because he's a genius and he's an economic genius and he's great at everything. And then Iraq went sideways, just like we told them it would.
And the economy crashed.
And the economy collapsed. And suddenly they'd never heard of George Bush. They were a bunch of Tea Parties.
They needed a whole Tea Party. Right.
Yeah. And they'd never heard of him, and they'd never been part of it. And Donald Trump, during the debate, we've mentioned this before in this podcast, turned to Jeb Bush and said the Iraq War was a fuck up and it was your fault.
Yeah,
and
your brother didn't keep us safe.
Right. And suddenly all the people who'd voted for Bush twice who were out there who were Republicans were absolved of any responsibility for any of the things they'd said or done. That's why they loved that guy.
Right. Mm-hmm. When they had said he was a good Christian man for 8 years.
And we've been going on now for quite a bit, so we're going to do a news roundup next episode. But
we'll no news roundup. It's our anniversary.
Yeah. Do whatever we want. Gosh.
But really, our hearts and prayers are with the people of Southern California. Mm-hmm. Each week we post to our Patreon page and website an Internet Kitty sent in by you, the listeners. This week's Internet Kitty is a dog named Nobu. She is a cavapoo that literally saved her humans during lockdown. She barks at the TV when Felon 47 appears, and we're not kidding about that. Mm-hmm. She is great at detecting evil. And of course, Nobu eats freshly poured pet food, our fake sponsor. Whether you serve pet store perfection or dollar store dreck, your dog will sit on the kitchen floor and demand that the food they eat is only freshly poured.
Freshly poured, freshly poured. Oh my Lord, it's freshly poured.
You can visit Nobu at our Patreon page, patreon.com/proleftpod, or our website, proleftpod.com. And you can send your Internet Kitty dog or other pet to us at our email address, proleftpodcast@gmail.com, subject line Internet Kitty. And you can also write to both of us. Feel free to write us. We love hearing from you. Be aware that if you write to us at any of our addresses, we reserve the right to read your email or U.S. Postal Service. Go Postal Unions. Letter on the air unless you say otherwise. Fire to joy.
Fire to joy, and don't forget our gourmet coffee guidelines. It's cold here, it's dark here, and we can sure use some espresso-based beverages. So if you can afford to buy an espresso-based beverage for yourself, go ahead and buy one for us. This isn't charity. This is, in fact, our job, and we've now been at it for 15 years. So, and never a sick day, Blue Cal. Never a sick day. If you can spare $5 a month or more, please spare $5 a month or more at patreon.com/proleftpod. Please, if you would, share our show on social media. If you love this podcast, please prevail upon someone else, like-minded person, to give us a listen. We really do thank you very much for doing that.
Hey, Driftglass, how are the Internet Kitties doing this week?
Well, as you know, Blue Gal, the Internet Kitties are all making regular vet trips this month, and I have never been less popular with them.
And your Patreon donation this month is definitely going to the vet.
It sure is. We're buying the vet a new vet.
Let's think about living.
Think about living.
Let's think about loving.
Think about loving.
Let's think about the hooping and the hopping and the popping and the lovey-dovey. Let's forget about the wine and the crying, the shooting and the dying, and the fellow with the switchblade knife. Let's think about living. Let's think about life.
The Professional Left podcast is recorded under a Creative Commons license. Copyright 2024-25, GGBG Productions.